First things first, we got to talk about the levels of organization within an ecosystem. Step one, this is what ecologists define as the interactions among organisms at different levels. Let's start at level one, populations. Now, populations are groups of animals, groups of individuals of the same species. They're living together in one ecosystem. Individuals in a population compete with each other for their habitat. Food, water, shelter make up an organism's habitat, which is the place it lives. How organisms in a population share the resources of their habitat determines how far apart they must live and how large the population can become. Taking humans, for example. We can live pretty close together to one another. That's why you can find extremely large populations in a small area. But if you think about the T-Rex, when he was alive, he needed a lot of space. He would take out any competitor that gave him the bombastic side eye. That helped reduce competition. Now, populations that share their environment and interact with other populations of other species are the communities. Think about you and your family as one species. You and your family might link up with your friend's family at the community center. My school goes to Edmonds Community Center. That's a great place to go. Have a swim with your friends. That is a community center bringing together multiple families, multiple populations, creating a community. A community is made up of all interacting populations that live in an area. Best example for you is the pine forest community. I don't know what type of forest I'm in right now, but if I was in a pine forest, the community would involve animals like the mole deer, hummingbirds, and spotted bats among the pine trees. In a community, each species has a particular habitat. Let's talk about sampling populations. Sampling populations is when ecologists want to study a certain place of an ecosystem and study the changes in population or the ecosystem itself over time, especially the changes in those populations, like seeing if they're declining over time or they're increasing. Kind of tells us if an animal is endangered or not. But you're thinking, hey, how could I measure the whole boreal forest biome, or maybe even just the whole lower mainland of BC? That's a lot of counting to do without those animals. You'll be right. That's why they use this thing called sampling size. So they mark a quadrant, maybe they take this small forest perhaps, and they measure this area only. So they'll measure how many trees, they'll count them up, how many trees are here, what type of trees, what type of soil is here, what type of animals live here, and how many. And then they multiply that by how many of these tiny forests can fit in the whole boreal forest biome. And then they get their average and their estimate of how many trees they might be there, how many pine trees in particular, what type of soil might be there, and what type of animals might be there. Let's talk about the indigenous perspective here. Now, the indigenous say that there's a thing between the humans and their environment called all my relations. Now, they believe in the 7-generation rule, meaning as we live today, we should consume and produce so that the next 7 generations of our children can also survive and thrive in a beautiful environment that we call home. All my relations. Now within that, there's something called all my relations. This is the connection that humans, abiotic, biotic, whatever it is all connected, and we're all related as one. And if I step here, I am now communicating energy to the ground, to the dead tree that lives here, that has fallen from hundreds and thousands of years ago, that it was alive and it stood tall and strong and provided oxygen for my grandfather and maybe my ancestors before that, and maybe for the people who lived here before that. See, the thing here is the indigenous perspective believes that everything we breathe and interact with is all connected. It's quite sustainable in their thinking in the future of our 7 generations. Now, this perspective is important, especially when you're talking about ecology and how we live, because if we want our grandchildren to see trees, ground, soil, water, fresh water, rivers, we have to start thinking about the environment and how we can protect it, as well as still eat and live, but not at its sacrifice. In 7 generations, will the earth still be livable for humans? What about your grandkids? Will they survive?